Theresa May's deal with the EU may make it harder for Britain to trade with the United States. Downing Street insisted the agreement will allow Britain to have an independent policy, meaning it can sign a new trade agreement with the US. Our Washington correspondent Dan Johnson told me more about President Trump's reaction.
Well, he certainly wasn't saying anything to be helpful to Theresa May. She's looked like a Prime Minister without many allies in the UK at the minute, and she certainly hasn't found one today over the other side of the Atlantic. She, of course, hopes that after Brexit, the UK can form good, strong, free trade agreements with countries around the world, but the US would be one of the biggest and most important partners that an independent UK would be hoping to trade with. Well, these comments from Donald Trump today saying that the sort of withdrawal agreement she has negotiated, that she is now pursuing, may not allow trade with the US will certainly come as a blow. And this is not just an accident that Donald Trump has intervened in this way. Not the first time he's cast doubt over the way the Prime Minister was negotiating Brexit. Well, this is what he said when he was asked earlier today what he thought of the current Brexit withdrawal deal.
Sounds like a great deal for the EU, and I think we have to do this. I think we have to take a look at seriously whether or not the UK is allowed to trade, because, you know, right now, if you look at the deal, they may not be able to trade with us, and that wouldn't be a good thing. I don't think they meant that. I don't think that the Prime Minister meant that, and hopefully she'll be able to do something about that. But right now, as the deal stands, they may not be able to trade with the US.
Now, we don't know how closely Donald Trump has actually read the withdrawal agreement, exactly how much of the detail he's across, but he seems to have picked up that the tone of the agreement is that there will be closer ties between the EU and the UK for some time to come, not just through that transition period till the end of 2019 into 2020, but perhaps even beyond that, especially if the issues around the Northern Ireland border can't be sorted out. So that's the sort of thing that he's picked up on, that he believes may make trade with the US more difficult. And we understand that Donald Trump has got his own links with people on the Brexit side in the UK, so it seems like he's fairly well informed. He's certainly taken a strong view that the current format of Brexit won't be good for UK-US trade.
Dan Johnson in Washington there. Let's go to some more of today's news now. And Mexico has called for a full investigation by the United States into the use of tear gas against hundreds of migrants who forcefully attempted to cross the border on Sunday. 42 people were arrested by US border patrols after jumping over the fence that separates the two countries. The incident prompted the US to close the border for several hours. The former Trump campaign aide George Papadopoulos has failed in his legal attempt to delay the start of his 2-week prison sentence. Mr. Papadopoulos pleaded guilty last year to lying to federal agents investigating alleged ties between Russia and the Trump campaign. And US prosecutors say Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign chairman, has breached a plea bargain agreement by lying to the FBI. The special counsel investigating alleged Russian meddling into the US election said the breach meant there was now no reason to delay sentencing. In August, Mr. Manafort was convicted of financial fraud relating to his work as a political consultant in Ukraine. Well, staying in Ukraine, it has declared martial law in part of the country after the seizure of 3 of its naval ships by Russia. The measures will be introduced on Wednesday and for now will be focused on tightening security. Russia claims it has acted legally, but Ukraine says it's the latest in a series of provocative acts in recent years. Our Moscow correspondent Steve Rosenberg reports.
Off the coast of Crimea, Russian border guards on collision course with the Ukrainian Navy. The Russians target a tugboat. The hint is less than subtle. Later, Russian forces shoot at, then seize the tug and 2 other Ukrainian vessels. This apparently a mayday from a Ukrainian sailor as the Russians storm his boat. A Russian replies. The vessels were towed to Russian-controlled Crimea. 23 Ukrainian servicemen have been detained. After the dramas at sea, the political battles over who's responsible. Moscow's reaction: don't blame Russia. Officials here have been presenting what happened as a Ukrainian provocation in Russian territorial waters. Well, Ukraine rejects that and insists this was an act of aggression against its navy. On the streets of Kiev, they agree. Death to Russia, he shouts. Protests and pyrotechnics outside the Russian embassy. Ukraine's president, Petro Poroshenko, called for 30 days of martial law in parts of the country. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, this warning for Moscow.
The United States will maintain its Crimea-related sanctions against Russia. Further Russian escalation of this kind will only make matters worse.
To some, the incident is a reminder of just how dangerous the Russia-Ukraine conflict is.
The war continues to be live, and the war could escalate any moment, while endanger the relationship between Russia and the West.
At sea and in the sky, Russia has sent a clear message to Ukraine and to the West. Don't mess with Moscow. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Well, Dr. Michael Slobodchikov is an associate professor of political science at Troy University in Alabama, who's published 2 books on Russian relations with post-Soviet states. He told us that could develop into something a great deal worse.
At this point, it's just a skirmish in the standoff. However, it could develop into something much more serious down the road. We're going down a road where the skirmishes keep intensifying and getting more serious, which will lead us down to a road eventually of open hostility and conflict between multiple players.
Well, what do you think the intent here is on both sides, the motive, if you like, for upping the ante?
I think the motive on the Ukrainian side is to shed light again on the situation with Crimea and Russia having helped in the southeastern part of Ukraine, and to get more weapons in its battle to retake eastern Ukraine. I think for the Russians, the motivation is to ensure that the people realize that they really do believe that Crimea belongs to them. They have annexed it, and they are willing to defend it.
Doesn't this put the onus on the West now to stand by Ukraine and also stand up to Vladimir Putin?
I think the onus is on the West to try and mediate a solution and to develop a solution. I think neither Ukraine nor Russia will back down, and it becomes imperative for the West to really resolve this crisis and to bring all sides together and to try and resolve it.
Dr. Michael Slobodchikov. Now, it's 2 months since a powerful earthquake and tsunami hit the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. Hundreds of children were separated from their families and more than 2,000 people died, with large areas being declared mass graves. But as Rebecca Henschke reports, in recent weeks there have been some extraordinary family reunions with their missing children.
5-year-old Jumadil is reunited with his mum a week after they were separated by the powerful quake and tsunami.
When he saw my face, he started crying and hugged me so tight. He didn't want to let go. He was so scared.
His grandfather shows me where Jumadil was playing on the beach that day, building sandcastles here, he says, not knowing what was about to happen. Mobile phone footage filmed from here captured the moment when the huge waves hit the bay of Palu and rushed through shops and homes and mosques. Jumadil's family searched for days in the rubble, looking for his body. It was a post on social media that led them to him. It's believed he was carried away by a police officer just in time.
It's just extraordinary that he survived. It's just an absolute miracle.
Social workers have reunited more than 14 children with their parents. 3 weeks after the disaster, Fikri is meeting his family, just when they'd almost given up hope.
At the hospital, we opened body bag after body bag, but we didn't find him. It turns out that he saw us on television and he cried out, "That's my mom."
A student had found him washed up in the rubble and had taken him back to her town to care for him. He's moved to another city with his parents. Schools here are not back to normal yet, and his grandma wants him to be safe. Jumadil has to go back to the beach each afternoon to help his mum.
He is still traumatized. If the lights go off, he gets very worried and runs into my arms. He gets flashbacks.
A whole generation here is traumatized. This healing workshop, a chance for children still living in tents to forget for a while what happened. With minor quakes still being felt here, they also recite songs about how to stay safe if another big one strikes. Rebecca Henschke, BBC News, Palu.
Stay with us here on BBC News, still to come. Paying tribute to Bernardo Bertolucci, one of the giants of world cinema who has died.
President Kennedy was shot down and died almost immediately. The murder of John Kennedy is a disaster for the whole free world. He caught the imagination of the world, the first of a new generation of leaders.
Margaret Thatcher is resigning as leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister. Before leaving number 10 to see the Queen, she told her cabinet, "It's a funny old world."
Angela Merkel is Germany's first woman chancellor, easily securing the majority she needed.
Attempts to fly a hot air balloon had to be abandoned after a few minutes, but nobody seemed to mind very much. As one local comic put it, it's not hot air we need, it's hard cash.
Cuba has declared 9 days of mourning following the death of Fidel Castro at the age of 90. Castro developed close ties with the Soviet Union in the 1960s. It was an alliance that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war with the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Welcome back. You're watching BBC News, the latest headlines. NASA has successfully landed a probe on the surface of Mars, sparking jubilation at Mission Control. And President Trump has warned Britain that the Brexit deal could damage US-UK trade in a fresh blow to Prime Minister Theresa May. Matthew Hedges, the British academic who was jailed on spying charges in the United Arab Emirates, has been pardoned and could be home as early as Tuesday. He'd been sentenced to life in prison last week, but the case prompted intense diplomatic efforts by the Foreign Office in London. Mr. Hedges had always protested his innocence, but officials in the UAE say he's still considered to be a spy, as our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams reports.
Matthew Hedges' 6-month ordeal is almost over. 5 days after being handed a life sentence, he'll soon be home.
Mr. Hedges will be permitted to leave the country once all the formalities are complete.
The hoped-for announcement came this morning, but with it a sting in the tail. The authorities in the United Arab Emirates still accuse Matthew Hedges of spying.
He was part-time PhD researcher, part-time businessman, but he was 100% a full-time Secret Service operative.
But his wife has always maintained his innocence. She's campaigned for months to secure his release.
In my heart, I know what Matt is. He's a PhD researcher. His colleagues know it, and his family know it, and hundreds of academics around the world know it, and that's all that matters. I mean, the most important thing really is that now we'll have him back home safely, and he'll be able to finish his thesis.
Matthew Hedges knows the UAE well. He worked there for several years before starting his PhD on aspects of the country's security policy. The government here doesn't think that should have landed him in jail.
We've made it very clear for a number of months now that we see no basis in these allegations. They've reflected on that. They've taken the action that they can, which means that Matthew Hedges is going to be reunited with his family.
The UAE remains convinced that Matthew Hedges was indeed a spy. He was certainly researching some sensitive areas, including the country's military capabilities and its role in the war in Yemen. But what he and most academics would regard as perfectly legitimate, the UAE clearly saw as suspect. In the end, it seems the UAE put its relationship with Britain first. It's an ally, a major trading partner and a big importer of British-made weapons. More than 100,000 UK nationals live and work there. Every year, over 1 million Britons go there on holiday. There's a lot at stake. Matthew Hedges' family says the ordeal has taken its toll and that he'll need time to recover. His life and career, put on 6 months ago, are about to resume. Paul Adams, BBC News.
General Motors has announced plans to halt production at 5 factories in North America and cut more than 14,000 jobs. The move follows slower car sales and rising costs, partly caused by tariffs on imported steel introduced by President Trump. The US car maker is to focus on its lineup of trucks and electric self-driving vehicles. Well, David Cohen, a professor of political science at the University of Akron, explained how important General Motors was to the overall economy of Ohio.
Much of northern Ohio is built on heavy manufacturing, and auto jobs and the other companies that depend on those auto jobs, like part suppliers, are heavily dependent on the big automakers, not only domestic but also foreign within the state of Ohio. And so General Motors, when they announced that they're going to be closing the Lordstown plant in the Youngstown area, that's a huge blow to northeastern Ohio, because you have so many jobs that are not only directly impacted by the people who work at Lordstown, but also the other companies in the supply chain that are dependent upon that plant and supplying the parts for those cars.
Yeah, the economics of the automotive industry are complex. So how much responsibility can we put at the door of the White House and President Trump's trade policies?
Certainly, Donald Trump and White House policies are partially to blame. They're not completely to blame. Part of the blame goes to the American consumer, whose tastes have changed over the years. And now 2/3 of the cars that were sold in the United States last year were trucks and SUVs and crossovers, as opposed to sedans. The Lordstown plant produces the Chevy Cruze, which is a compact car. And so it's not that profitable a car for GM to be making. However, Donald Trump, when he was campaigning and when he was in office, has initiated a trade war with not only competitors in the United States, but also allies, including Canada and Mexico. And that the trade war, the steel tariffs that he has imposed on steel, according to General Motors and other automakers, has jacked up the prices of those vehicles and the raw materials. General Motors blames $1 billion lost in revenue because of the trade war.
So how will that affect President Trump in Ohio, which of course is such a crucial state in the presidential elections?
Well, Ohio is not only a crucial state, it's a must-win state. No Republican has ever won the presidency without winning the state of Ohio. And so I think this is very damaging, especially if indeed GM does go ahead and shut down that plant in 2019 like they have promised.
Professor David Cohen there. The Italian film director Bernardo Bertolucci, widely regarded as one of the giants of world cinema, has died after a long illness. He was 77. His career spanned more than half a century, and his films included the iconic Last Tango in Paris and The Last Emperor. Lisa Mzimba looks back on his life and many achievements.
Look! This was perhaps Bernardo Bertolucci's masterpiece. The Last Emperor, the true story of Pu Yi.
Look!
Only a small child when he became China's last imperial ruler. It swept the Oscars, winning 9 Academy Awards, including Best Film and Best Director for Bertolucci himself. The historical epic, years in the making, was also a movie milestone. It was the first film allowed to be shot in Beijing's Forbidden City, something the director had felt was essential for his vision.
I couldn't find another place like the Forbidden City. This is an incredible, amazing, huge place. I mean, Hollywood never dared to build a set like this one.
Years before his early film The Conformist had been an influence on directors like Spielberg. He went on to make one of the most controversial films of the 1970s. Last Tango in Paris shocked audiences with its sexual content. Before her death, the actress Maria Schneider said the way the director and her male co-star, Marlon Brando, decided to film one scene made her feel as if she'd been assaulted. Bertolucci denied this, saying she was aware in advance of the violent nature of the scene in question. In recent years he'd been in ill health, but still travelled the globe, doing everything from being celebrated with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to being presented with an honorary Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. He'll be remembered as one of cinema's greats, much of whose work is as powerful today as when it was first experienced by audiences.
The Italian film director Bernardo Bertolucci, who has died at the age of 77. And that's the way it's looking this hour. You're watching BBC News. I'm Duncan Golostani. Thank you very much for your company. See you again soon.
Hello there. Well, we certainly started off the working week on a pretty chilly note for most of us, didn't we? If it was too much for you, I can offer you something just that little bit milder, but unfortunately it comes at a price, turning increasingly wet and windy over the next few days. Let's take a look at the main culprits. It's these areas of low pressure pushing in from the Atlantic, and they will move across the UK a little bit later on today, and they will bring some extremely wet weather at times, but also some milder weather. So we lose that easterly flow that's been coming in off the North Sea. The winds swing round to a southwesterly, coming in with that area of low pressure, drags in the milder air, but the winds will be gusting to gales or severe gales over the next couple of days. We start off though with a little bit of patchy mist and fog around, but as the breeze picks up, that'll help lift that. A chilly-ish start, as you can see, with temperatures into low single figures first thing, but it won't be long before that cloud and rain starts to move in to the southwest. So it's going to be a wet start across Cornwall and South Wales and into Northern Ireland as well. Slow improvement here for you as we go into the afternoon. Let's take a look at the finer detail for this afternoon and see what's in prospect. There's the brighter weather starting to push in to Cornwall through the afternoon. Double figures, but some heavy rain into the southwest across Wales, the Midlands, and stretching up into the north of England. The rain shouldn't arrive to the eastern England, so here it should stay dry and relatively bright, but we'll see most of the rain starting to ease out of Northern Ireland as we go through the afternoon. It stays relatively dry, windy with it across much of Scotland. By the end of the day, you can see that rain starting to show its hand across the southwest. So that moves through overnight. The next area of low pressure moves through, and then just look at the isobars squeezed together. That's where the strongest of the winds are going to be, across the southern flank of that area of low pressure. So we could see gusts of winds in excess of 60 miles an hour on exposed coast, maybe higher, and it will bring some heavy rain, particularly through Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland and northwest England. Although the rain is lighter in nature further south, it's still going to be pretty windy with it as well. In terms of the feel of things, I did promise you something a little bit milder, double digits, in fact mid-teens for many, but when you factor in the wind and the rain, it's probably not going to feel very great out there. And it's not long before we see another area of low pressure moving in, bringing some heavy rain. This time the emphasis is across central and southern parts of England on Thursday. So wet and windy again to the south on Thursday, something drier, brighter and a little less windy by the end of the week.
Our World is a unique series of films on the BBC.
I want to be able to bring her home.
Offering personal insights into global events. Our World, stories that speak for themselves. Saturday and Sunday nights at 9:30 on the BBC News Channel.
Follow the story, whatever you're doing, wherever you are. You can follow every moment in depth with BBC News. Get the full story at bbc.co.uk/news. Get the headlines as they happen with the breaking news alert. And keep up with events by watching the BBC News Channel in the app. Follow the story wherever you are with BBC News.
Hello, this is BBC News, the latest headlines. NASA has successfully landed a probe on Mars. There was jubilation at Mission Control in California after it survived a dramatic 7-minute plunge to the planet's surface. It's already sent back its first image, kicking off 2 years of scientific discovery. Ukraine has declared martial law in part of the country after Russia's seizure of 3 Ukrainian Navy ships. It follows a naval clash off the coast of Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014. A number of Western countries have condemned Moscow's actions. And President Trump has suggested Britain's Brexit agreement with the EU could leave it unable to negotiate a free trade agreement with the US. His comments are a fresh blow to Prime Minister Theresa May. An inquest into the death of the former Welsh Government Minister Carl Sargent has opened in North Wales. Mr Sargent had been sacked last November following accusations of sexual misconduct. He was found dead 4 days later at his home. Our Wales correspondent Sian Lloyd reports.
Carl Sargent was a well-known figure in the Welsh Assembly. His death last year left his family grief-stricken and sent shockwaves through the Welsh political establishment in Cardiff Bay. His body was found at his family home 4 days after he'd been sacked from his post and suspended from the Welsh Labour Party amid allegations of sexual misconduct which he denied. Walking arm in arm, Mr Sargent's wife Bernie and son Jack came to his inquest today, where the note that she'd found close to her husband's body was read to the court. Directed to family and friends, it said, "I have let you down badly. You deserve none of this adverse publicity because of my acts. I have failed you. That aside, I love you more than you'll ever know, and I'm sorry I've taken the easy way out. Please forgive me. I love you, Carl." The inquest heard that Carl Sargent had suffered from depression and had been prescribed medication on a number of occasions. A former colleague, Leighton Andrews, said he was concerned about the impact that TV interviews given by the Welsh First Minister Cadwyn Jones about the alleged complaints had on his state of mind. He considered it to be irresponsible. The coroner reminded Mr Andrews that was his opinion, and the inquest will hear from the First Minister Cadwyn Jones later in the week. Sian Lloyd, BBC News, Rhuthun.
Now on BBC News, it's time for The Travel Show.
This week on the show, Paris by Tim Snail.
Where is the gear stick?
The gear stick is there, you know?
Seeing Seoul in a hurry, and the EU after Brexit.
Take your place. Get ready, go!
Oh, this is so tough. My back is about to break.
And there's gold and then there are hills. We head to Slovakia to find our fortune.
Yes. Oh no. Miss Laird.
Our travels this week begin in a European capital very familiar to many of us, a city that's become a market leader in clichés.
I'm here in the city of love, but also the city of cars, and plenty of them.
One, though, in particular stands out more than any other in the hearts of the French people, the Citroën 2CV. And this year, she's turning 70. The 2CV was born in 1948 in the immediate aftermath of World War II. The very first prototypes, as well as the very last model and all the others in between, are kept here at the Citroën Heritage Centre in the north of Paris.
Oh, here they are. They've really got character. And this one, I mean, you can probably see from the bullet holes, must have been from the Bond film. For your eyes only.
With its unique shape, the 2CV, short for deux chevaux or two horses, quickly came to fame, and not only in movies. Within a few decades, the car became a common sight on France's roads and in its countryside.
The founding design principle of this car was 4 wheels under an umbrella. The idea of a light car but with really good suspension, so you could drive over a field with 4 passengers and a basket of eggs on your lap. And by the end of your journey, none of the eggs would have broken.
More than 5 million were produced until the last one in 1990. But fans and owners still gather annually to celebrate a car that's been used by generations of French motorists.
I've caught the train out to a suburb on the outskirts of Paris because I've heard out here there's a place where people... I think I found it. Ah, bonjour! Hello, this must be the 2CV Club. I hope so. You must be Christian? Bonjour. Hello. Good to meet you. Look at all these beautiful cars.
Christian presides over a fan club of over 100 members. It's one of dozens across France.
Beautifully done.
They meet every weekend to repair and cherish their babies.
So why is this car so popular? Why do people love it so much?
It's in the French way of life. It's different to all cars. The way you drive it, you're not looking for speed, you're not looking for anything fantastic. And then at the club where we are here today, we all work on our cars and have fun and go out on a little bit of a rally or something like that, you know.
Non mais, toi la première.
Taking a 2CV on a rally is no easy matter.
This is your rally car.
Christian is currently preparing his for the club's rally trip to Oman next year. Their plan is to drive 3,000 kilometers through the desert.
Donc les voitures sont spécialement préparées. Donc on renforce des parties de la voiture, le châssis. Les contrôles se passent sur les boîtes de vitesse, le moteur aussi. On met une voiture en parfait état pour ne pas avoir de problème dans le désert. Mais on prend quand même la pelle. Ah oui, il faut quand même une pelle au cas où.
Oman won't be the club's first rally. In years gone by, it's organised dozens around the world.
How many miles in this car, do you think?
Peut-être 50 000.
Wow, 50,000 kilometres. And what about this?
The water.
Oh, water goes, I bet.
Little Ricard.
Yeah.
Collectors now pay up to €170,000 for the rarest, but there are still plenty around. It's thought about 100,000 still drive on French roads. They're also a fun addition to any weekend in the capital.
Bonjour!
Bonjour, Christelle.
Vincent, good to meet you.
Good to meet you.
This must be it.
This is it. Good job to drive.
There you go.
Vincent takes guided tours around Paris.
I'm definitely going to need a lesson, Vincent.
He'll even let you drive if you ask nicely. And once you get the hang of it, it's really good fun.
Now, where is the gear stick?
The gear stick is there. You know?
Okay.
So you just turn that if you want to pass the first one. And pull, this is first. Okay, then back to neutral.
There.
And push. Second.
Second. This is very unusual.
Yeah, I know that. It's unique.
It might take, please excuse me if we bunny hop up the street.
Driving a 2CV feels actually very different to any kind of modern car.
You can feel the engine under your foot, you know, and the noise of the car, and it's very physical, and it's not a car that goes very fast, but it's not the goal, you know.
It's a very kind of active experience.
Yeah.
There's no sitting back and letting the car do its work. You have to be involved.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is the Louvre Museum.
Is there something, I mean, do you think this is part of French identity?
Yes, it is, of course. Yes, with the baguette and with the stripes.
Well, we've got two on the street. We'll have to stop for the baguette.
Yeah. You're very brave because driving a 2CV car is not easy. Driving in Paris is not easy. Driving for the first time a 2CV car in Paris is really brave for you.
Well, now you're making me nervous.
There are no airbags, the windows aren't electric, and as for AC, let's just say it's pretty rudimentary. But for some reason, the French really seem to love the 2CV. As long as that remains the case, the car they call the Tin Snail will keep ploughing its own furrow on slow lanes everywhere.
And if you're thinking of heading here anytime soon, here are some of the things we think you should look out for in Paris this winter.
Like many European cities, Paris abounds with Christmas markets in December. The biggest is in the La Défense business district, where you'll find 300 stalls selling food, decorations and crafts. Keep an eye on the shop windows too. Some of the big department stores lay on some really stunning displays at this time of year. If you want something a bit different, the Museum of Fairground Arts opens its 12-day annual festival on the 26th of December. You'll be able to see live shows and have a go on old-fashioned merry-go-rounds and games. And Paris Fashion Week is in mid-January, but for most of us mortals, the winter sales are going to be the closest thing we get to being part of it. They kick off on the 10th and you can get pretty good discounts. You might need to get those sharp elbows out for some of the best deals though. The competition can be fierce.
Still to come on the travel show.
Our global guru's back with his pearls of wisdom. This week, seeing the US by train and Seoul in a hurry. And going for gold deep in the hills of Central Europe. This week I've been exploring the French capital. This is the 7th arrondissement, familiar to those of us who've been to the Eiffel Tower. But that's not my destination this time.
So there's a place I really wanted to show you in Paris. I've heard a lot about it and I've never had a chance to see it myself, so I'm going to go check it out. Bonjour. This way?
This is Desrolles, a taxidermist which for almost 190 years has specialised in very high-end stuffing.
This is insane. How did they even get this up the stairs? It's so odd to be able to see creatures like this so up close, and they're beautifully done. It's obviously taxidermy, but the artistry, even on such close inspection, is just, it's perfect.
These animals, all of which you can buy, came mainly from zoos, circuses and farms.